Walther LGV returned to the shelves in 2012 and had a hell of a lot to live up to, as the original LGV had already took the world by storm in the 1960s as an out-the-box 177 open-sighted competition rifle. I had one from the 70s myself, albeit in the 90s, so why wouldn't I look at one as a 177 open-sighted or scoped competition rifle to upgrade from the Century. Now I know I like the current Walthers, and I am a bit of a brand whore in that respect, but I think you can't go wrong with the old adage of go with what you know, and anyone who has worked on German cars and then gone French will back me on this. Effectively, I'm saying you generally get less stress due to a lack of unexpected surprises sticking with VWs throughout your life, or Peugeots if you swing that way. That said, variety is supposedly the spice of life, so I made it clear to myself on this occasion I wouldn't do that with a Walther Century's replacement. So let's go through the Walther LGV's contenders. The HW 99, 97, 77, 57 and 35 all fell short due to either uncomfortable stocks or lacking in refinement stroke tech. Although stunning to look at, I found the Diana 340 massively unbalanced, and anything else recoiling, open-sighted and in Solware stock was again lacking in tech, meaning they would need a tickle close to the value of the rifle to get working for me correctly. The Air Arms TX200s are solid and proven, but again they lack open sights. Out of the box, the heavy-boned Walther LGV had the fit, the balance, the refinement and tech, and the cost. Quality and delivery I knew I could trust to be there from experience of my previous Walthers. So what LGV did I go for? Well, there are two open-sighted rifles in the range, however only one has the competition globe sight. The very Century looking Master, the basic model in the range, which incidentally is the range's only true open sight competition rifle and true to the original LGV of the 60s and 70s. Main attraction is it has a 17mm globe sight, so and shuts element compatible. It also means I can get serious on upgrading the foresight elements with the likes of Intershoot or Reading Killy, giving me the option to go the full diopter setup by replacing the solid looking rear sight. The other variants of the LGV are adorned with nicer grades of stock and various delighters such as True Glow open sights or specialist stocks, but the refined tech is still the same as the base Master LGV. So that's the logic behind the purchase and the history done to death. Let's go over the unboxing. Inside the slogan emblazoned box is of course the rifle, complete with open sights. There's the instruction manual and a set of inserts and Allen keys for the various bits and bobs. Effectively, you should be good to go within seconds of opening the box. A quick whip round the rifle shows. The stock is in essence the same as the Century, a blocky beach stock with a better grain and a more matted varnish. That could just be a lucky example though. And don't forget, there is a synthetic version. Literally, that is the differences covered in regards to the identical Manelli stock in the Century videos. So I'm not going to go back over old ground, rather more focus on the other LGV stocks available. The Master you're now familiar with. The Master Pro is effectively a scope only LGV with the LGU stock, and the LGV Competition Ultra shares that LGU shaped stock but with an adjustable comb. Price increases respectively up the range. The squishy butt pad is squishy but a different shape to the Century. In honesty, I like the Century pad over this one. This one is a bit rounded, seats a bit loose in my shoulder, however they are just generic pads and I have seen these exact pads on TX200s. The screws in the forestock are not a panhead screw like the Century, and this is again a little letdown visually, but on a competition rifle where maintenance is high, I find that you're less likely to round at squared cap head as the drive is deeper than a panhead screw, giving better hex key engagement and in turn a longer life. As always on Walthers, the safety is perfectly placed shotgun style for excellent ergonomics. Inside the action, just forward off the safety, the LGV shares the same features as the Century and LGU, with the only difference being the trigger blade itself. I'm going to hold back on the trigger action and delivery stroke finer details until the long-term review, but out the box it feels close to the tuned Lynn Lewington Steve Pope Remington Express trigger in my Remy AR1, which, putting it bluntly, is damn near perfect when correctly set. However, you do need to know what you're doing dialing it in, or it can go wrong fast and require resetting, which will be a strip down of the LGV's action and out with the steel rules. The action is smooth and slick during cocking and firing, with the recoil being notably firm and positive. There's not a whiff of twanging, just a nice consistent thwop with a firm but gentle push on and off the shoulder. In the first few hundred shots, the trigger did on occasion fail to set, leaving the rifle locked and loaded with no safe way of discharging it. The solution was to simply recock it. This stopped happening somewhere between 750 and 1,000 shots, and has been trouble-free for around 3,000 shots now. The die-cast trigger guard is of course the same as the Century again, but this is a common thing with most airgun marks these days, and yes, you do get the same one on the LGU also. Looking at the bluing on the air cylinder out the box, it was very dry and matted, and like the Brown & X-Blade Hunter, it really needed a light lube with protection oil to give it a nice deep luster, so don't worry if it looks dull and matted out the box. The scope rails are 11mm dovetails with 3 arrestor pin through holes in the rear of the cylinder itself, bottoming against the action. And again, if it wasn't for the LGV etching, we really could be mistaking this for the Century. The internals of the cylinder are what Walther focused on the 2012 LGVs. Inside sits a sleeve that does not rotate, only slides back and forth on Delrin O-rings, and this sleeve is what locks up a free floating, again on Delrin O-rings, top hat style piston. The idea being that the piston can rotate freely and independently as the spring extends. Think about it, most spring rifles have a machine slot in the piston itself for the cocking linkage. This restricts the piston from rotating, meaning the spring, which has to rotate by nature, has to do so inside the piston. This is where that twang or doink noise comes from as the spring extends. Top hats etc. internally can help, but these are under compression at the time and have a larger surface area. And don't forget the chatter on the edges of the cocking lever slot in the piston. More friction, more vibration. By allowing a piston to rotate freely on thin Delrin O-rings, it removes the vibrations and chatter from the spring. Each moving part simply glides and moves as required by the spring. This makes a very slick and smooth and reasonably quiet firing cycle, plus minimal contact between the parts, care of Delrin O-rings, means less effort to overcome friction during cocking and firing. This isn't new in regards to air guns, as nearly all good quality underlevers effectively work the same way. On a brake barrel though, it's not that common to do it. This design pushes the charge of air into the famous LGV and Century's force-fit locked breech. This is a godsend out in the field for noise reduction versus a sprung plunger or ball bearing, as you control the clatter during a reload. But more importantly, it maintains alignment to the cylinder, meaning the charge of air is very consistent. The chamber of the breech is, on this rifle, damn tight on most pellets, but nicely machined and chamfered. The choked barrel itself is a 400mm carbine by Walther Loader, just like the Century, but it's void of a weight, which is annoying as these do make a difference. But they had to make room for that globe sight, which can be upgraded completely thanks to the foresight dovetails. Just forward of them is the 1/2" UNF attachment threads, which are covered by this functional looking cap. The rear sight looks solid, but in fact was pretty floppy, which meant shimming with 75 micron Teflon tape in order to get some consistency from the package. Also, the foresight inserts supplied were too short on the posts and required me making my own for a shooting competition in order to get a sub 50 yard zero, as the rear sight bottomed out. So yes, the whole reason for buying this rifle was pretty flawed, until I got it sort of working. That's about it for quality. So what can that 400mm barrel deliver when I got the competition insert in there and the rear sight shimmed and zeroed to somewhere between 25 to 30 yards? Well, the first 10 shots went through the chrono showing a 10.8 foot-pound, 759.8 feet per second average with day-state sovereigns. I suppose it's just enough power-wise for in the field, but being a competition rifle, not something I'll probably notice. Also, let's be honest, most competition rifles are hugely underpowered anyway for accuracy, but can I live with it being underpowered in HFT? Shot-to-shot split was up to 43 feet per second over this first out-the-box 10-shot string, which is not the greatest, but definitely not the worst either. It also dieseled a fair bit. A clean of the barrel and 100 shots later, plus another clean of the barrel to rid the continuing dieseling, the chrono showed a 16-shot string of day-state sovereigns now at 10.95 foot-pound, 764.7 feet per second average, a slight improvement, but the split was down by over 50% at 19.7 feet per second. For comparison, the S410 with its simple valve system, as efficient as it is, can straight up to 30 feet per second shot to shot. So that free floating piston tech clearly works, and it'll be interesting in the long term review to see how it develops as it settles in. Probably the most painful thing to swallow right now though is the grouping from that barrel. It's pellet fussy to say the least, but I have to say, when you do get a pellet that it likes, which is currently Acupel FT, it is damn tight at 25. It can keep up with PCPs at 50 yards in the main group, but here comes the rub. Then it shoots all over the place and goes back to tight groups again. It's not just on 1 or 2 targets either, it's a whole friggin' stack of them. I can't tell you what it is right now that's causing this issue. That has to wait for the long term review. Stay tuned, but I'm confident it's not me. Delivery of that tech on paper is one side of the story, the experience of that tech is the other. The firing cycle is sweet, it really does feel tuned out the box. The recoil is smooth and graceful and allows me to follow the shot without wincing in the scope, a real nice feeling. Of course, all that begins with the trigger, which out the box was pretty good. I didn't feel shy to squeeze it, or have to take my attention away from the target and put it to the trigger. Of course, it got a slight tweak after I got a feel for it. Overall, the only spring rifle I've shot out the box that was better on recoil was a TX200 SR. So here's my initial thoughts of the LGV Master. I can't say this is currently worth all the money I paid for it, because in honesty it's not performing 100%. I'd say it performs at around 90% now and at 80% at purchase. Armex and Solware may now be ready to chastise me, but please wait a second. It's a 350 quid rifle that isn't working right now. I did have to play on with the sights and buy a new 4-sight insert. In all, £5.50 for that extra 10%, but I honestly sense there's a very simple root cause here that's hampering that last 10% of what is a very good rifle. I sense this because I went with something I'm familiar with already, Walther. Remember that whole go with what you know thing? So I didn't return it and demand a new one. I'm going to work with it, understand it fully, and feed back to you in the long-term review what I found to be the issue. Because honestly people, when this thing is in the zone, my god is it in the zone, and I mean that 100%. It's a great value solid platform when it's on. There are many LGVs that work out the box on YouTube. I'm notoriously hard but fair on reviews. This shouldn't put anyone buying off this great icon that has returned, priced to dominate and take on the long-term legends in its class. As always, stay safe, shoot straight, don't troll, and I'll see you in the long-term review.